You're locked into Inception Radio Network, Superior, Wisconsin.
You're tuned in to Night Vision Radio, exposing the truth one secret at a time. Prepare yourself as we explore the shadow worlds of suppressed history, secret knowledge, forbidden religion, and shine a light on the conspiracies to keep it all from us. Welcome to Night Vision Radio. And good evening, everyone. How are you? Glad to see you here. I see my chat roomies are there waiting for us to start the show. Hi, everybody in there. I'm glad that you could join me. Hope you got some good questions for my guests tonight or comments, because it's going to be a fascinating subject that we're going to be covering. Before we get to tonight's show, just want to make a couple of quick announcements. First of all, anyone who's interested in any of the France tours, please contact me on Facebook or through Night Vision Radio on Facebook, and I'll be happy to get back to you immediately. I don't want to take up too much time on that, but we'd love to have you come along. It's, going to Southwest France, to my old stomping grounds over there where I filmed the movie Bloodline, and where there is so much to explore. So anybody interested in going with us this year, let us know, and we'll be happy to speak with you about it and send you the information. Now, also, please friend me on Facebook, and also, if you don't mind, if you could go to the Night Vision Radio Facebook page and like it, that would be very, very helpful and much appreciated. So also want to thank and acknowledge our buddy Mark Eddy this evening. He actually was the first person to make the connection between my guest tonight and myself nearly a couple of years ago now, where we were talking about another book and other research that he had done on the Book of Enoch. But tonight, my guest is Robert Sullivan IV. We're going to be talking about his new book called Cinema Symbolism, a guide to esoteric imagery in popular movies. Welcome to the show once again, Robert.
Hey, René. Thanks for having me on Night Vision. It's great to be back with you.
Well, it's always great to have you. It's such an interesting subject this time, too. And I think you sort of run the gamut on your coverage of films in this book, because there's something for everybody. It's not just one style of film, and it's not just sort of one decade. You've sort of taken a look throughout the decades at symbolism or sort of hidden messages, hidden meaning in Hollywood films. And I know that I was looking on your website, and it talked about, the occult, numerology, astrology, mythology, alchemy, the tarot, the Kabbalah, and all these types of images contained within popular films. Now, can I ask you, are these, it would seem to me like there might be a couple of different kinds of symbolism or meaning, and that is deliberate symbols or deliberate images placed in that give a deliberate message. And then is there also an element of the filmmaker as an artist just sort of picking up from maybe the collective unconscious or other ideas out there, and they're not really consciously putting in the symbols, but being artists, they sort of come from an unconscious place? Is that part of it at all?
Yeah, I definitely. I think when you're dealing with the collective unconscious, I think these filmmakers are aware of it and incorporate. Since it is unconscious, technically we don't know what it is, but we know some of its components are, ancient religion, mysticism, alchemy, astrology, some of the things you mentioned. You can also craft the argument that there are some filmmakers who are, they're under this influence as well, and may not necessarily be aware of this esoterica, but are incorporating it, unconsciously. I document that as well. But I think in most instances, these filmmakers are very cognizant of this material, know it's very powerful, and are intentionally placing it in the film. I don't necessarily ascribe a sinister motive to this per se, but I would say that it's definitely for them a form of like mythology making is really what it boils down to. Plus, I mean, they're literally raking in money hand over fist on this. So it's very powerful. It's very powerful imagery. But yeah, I mean, a lot of this arcana comes out of the collective unconscious, and in turn, you do have filmmakers who can be influenced as well. The camera captures everything, as they say. So I do talk about it in the movie where you'll find a filmmaker who you research the person and they really had no knowledge of this material, but you'll find these esoteric themes in their films. So how do you reconcile it? Well, they're under the influence as well, just like everybody else. But by and large, I do believe it's intentional, and I've seen too much evidence of it to think otherwise.
Now, you said you don't necessarily ascribe, a sinister meaning to it necessarily, but is there an intentional, at least some of the time, an intentional subliminal message that they're giving to the viewer? Is there something that makes them want to see the movie more, or I'm not sure, or somehow to influence the viewer? Is that
well? I don't
possible?
know if it's. Yeah, I mean, sure it is. It's. I don't know if it's to influence the viewer to do anything in particular or anything. Like I said, I don't really view it as a form of mind control. But I think it's. They're using this imagery that's very veiled. They're not going to come out and announce it, but it helps by incorporating it. It helps with plot lines, and it imbues the movie with different levels of meaning. And it's almost like a challenge in some instances. You watch a movie. It takes me numerous times to watch a film to pick up on everything. I mean, and even now, as I sit here talking to you, I'm sure there could be movies I've seen a dozen times where I still have missed stuff. Some movies are just really overloaded with it. Some have more than others. Surprisingly, there have been movies I've watched expecting to see a lot and haven't seen any. So it just varies, and I definitely, like I said, it was really more than enough. And really, this book grew out of the final chapter of Royal Arch of Enoch, where I talked about some Masonic and solar and Enochian themes in movies. Just to make a long story short, it was movies that I definitely could document it in, and I sort of applied that same maxim when I was doing cinema symbolism. I mean, I had to be 100% sure that I was convinced of what I was seeing, and was certain that the evidence was clear to really do an analysis of the film. It wasn't the sort of thing where I just saw it once or twice and let's talk about it. I mean, I really had to be convinced that I was seeing what I was seeing, and then it was definitely enough of it to convince me that it was intentionally there.
And do you think that this phenomena goes across other media like television and maybe comic books and other things? Do you think that, I mean, it sort of reminds me of, the hidden symbols in Renaissance paintings. But I think those were quite intentional, and, a lot of them, contained what would have been called heretical messages and things like that. But do you think it just sort of runs the gamut of art in general? Or do you think that have you noticed, for instance, if you're watching TV, that there was something you recognized in a TV show that, they left in the frame for some reason or another? Or is it strictly films that you've noticed this in?
Oh, no, it's in TV shows. TV shows have incorporate some of these themes. Music videos incorporate some of these themes. You talk about comic books. I mean, a lot of comic book characters are very, archetypical, and incorporate, again, these elements coming out of the collective unconscious. So, I mean, you will find, you mentioned at the beginning of the show how it kind of spans genres. I mean, you will find, I get into it in Hollywood, and with cinema. But I mean, certainly you even go back in time to the 19th century with the works of, composers like Richard Wagner, very steeped in mythology, a lot of his works. You go to Mozart with the magic flute, a lot of Illuminati, religious, Masonic symbolism in that. I mean, the works of William Shakespeare, a lot of references to, mythology, Midsummer Night's Dream, the occult, astrology, things like that. So, I mean, it does run the game. And like you said, you'll find it incorporated into these Renaissance masters, works of arts. And it really is sort of the same thing, when you're dealing with a lot of these themes by incorporating, the golden ratio and the Vesica Pisces into paintings, and sacred geometry, and then you incorporate it into a building, with the alignments astrologically. Well, then you put it in a movie, it's the same sort of thing. It turns your movie into, a living piece of artwork, a living piece of mythology. And like I said, it's definitely, I'm 100% convinced that it is definitely there and definitely intentional.
Wow, and we're not talking about the hidden body parts in The Little Mermaid and things like that. We're talking about real esoteric symbolism, and you're talking about astrology, numerology, even Kabbalistic symbolism. Now, today I had fun. I guess it was yesterday, probably, I posted a picture from the Wizard of Oz, and every week I change my Facebook background to sort of go along with something that's going to be on the show, but I just kind of wait to see who picks up on it. And but the Wizard of Oz I put because it's such a classic. It's something, it's a film that everyone has seen. I mean, every kid in the world at some point sees Wizard of Oz. And normally, those of us, that are adults have seen it more than once over our lifetimes. Can you talk a little bit about what you found within the Wizard of Oz?
Oh, sure. Absolutely. Wizard of Oz is steeped in mysticism. You have really three levels of allegory going on. The first is just your perfunctory, it's a girl living on a farm, gets whisked away to a magical land, has an adventure, goes home, the end, have a nice day. But then you get into really much more deeper allegories. One is a little more on the surface than the other, and one's a little more well-known than the other. And that is that the Wizard of Oz is a retelling of the political life, economic, socio-political life in the United States of America from about 1895 to around 1905, where you have, certainly in 1896 you had a massive depression in the United States. Not a lot of people are aware of it. Everyone knows of the one in the late 20s, early 1930s.
Right, 29, yeah.
Yeah, there was a big depression in 1896, which saw foreclosures, people losing their farm, laborers being laid off. So, of course, you have the girl losing the farm to the tornado at the beginning, symbolizing foreclosure. But then she goes to the magical land. You have the Wizard of Oz is the President of the United States, William McKinley, who wanted to use the gold standard to back green money. This is why the yellow brick road or the gold standard always leads to the creation of paper money. And that's why
also it was the Emerald City that they were going to, which is green.
Right, that's right. It's green money. It's the gold standard leads to the green money. In the book, in Baum's book, the Dorothy wears silver slippers. They're not ruby.
Oh.
They didn't turn upright in the filming of the movie, and they wanted to use ruby because they were using Technicolor, which was brand new. But the silver slippers actually symbolize something called the Free Silver Movement, and this was also the idea of using silver to back green money. This is why the silver walks with the gold towards the green money or Emerald City. And then, of course, you have the Scarecrow, who is the American farmer. You have Tin Man, who is the American laborer. And again, the idea is this is the political allegory that the laborer is laid off. That's why he's immobile. Well, if you in history, in the history of the time, the American laborer was put back to work by the oil companies, by people like, J.P. Rockefeller, Standard Oil. This is why the Tin Man needs to be oiled up to get him moving again or back to work. And then, of course, you have the one real quick. I'll go to the other one. I'll go to the other symbolism in a minute. I'll just wrap up here. But then, of course, you have the two little dancing crews of Munchkins, the Lollipop League, which is the unionized labor movement, the workers, and then, of course, you have the Lullaby League, which is the women. This is the women's suffrage movement that was waking up at this time. That's why they were sleeping yet waking up. That's why they're the Lullaby League. So you have this very deep political allegory going on in The Wizard of Oz. But then you also have this idea of the initiation into what I would call the initiation into the mystery tradition, neo-Gnosticism, within The Wizard of Oz. And this is clearly intentionally done by the author of the book, L. Frank Baum. Baum and his wife were members of Madame Blavatsky's Theosophy movement.
Oh my gosh!
Which was an occult movement. It was basically neo-Gnosticism. So you have the idea, and I'm just going over this very briefly, but you have the idea of the girl being whisked to the magical land, up the ladder, up the tornado. This would be the ladder of Minerva, the ladder of Mithras, Jacob's ladder. In Masonry, this is called the ladder of the middle chamber that leads to wisdom. So she goes up the ladder to receive gnosis, to go on this magical adventure where she's going to have an epiphany. This is paralleled in Alice in Wonderland, only Alice goes down the rabbit hole. Dorothy goes up the tornado, and then she's in this magical land, and it's the idea that she's walking on the golden path of religion. But of course, in Gnosticism and Theosophy taught that religions lead to a false messiah, which of course in The Wizard of Oz is the wizard who is a phony, who's a fake, and he's a vile monster. He's evil. And the idea of a beautiful land being ruled by the monster is come straight out of Gnosticism. This is the character that the wizard would be is called the demiurge. He's this lesser creator god. Yeah, exactly.
Ruling the earth. Yeah, exactly.
Right. Yeah, so she goes to this magical land, and Blavatsky said in order to be initiated into the mysteries, initiated into gnosis, you have to have intelligence, fortitude, and courage. This is why Dorothy has the three travelers who are looking for a brain, a heart, and courage. And then, you have the idea of the two good women, the women who use the white Kabbalistic magic. They're of the north and south, and that's right, because in order to move upwards towards Ascensio, towards apotheosis, towards awakening, you move up and down the ladder. The two women who oppose her, the one is killed off right immediately, are the east and west. These are the women who use the black magic. And the reason they're the east and west is that's stagnation. You can't achieve gnosis by moving left and right. Symbolically, you can only achieve it by moving up and down. So then you have the idea that Dorothy finally has this epiphany, which for her is there's no place like home. She has this, sublime awakening. Then she finally gets returned home by the wizard of all things in a hot air balloon. And again, this is the idea that the wizard, as the false messiah, that religions are nothing but hot air, so he's going to take her back in the hot air balloon. And then, of course, when she gets back home, she realized, no one understands the adventure. She's the only one who understands her, conscious awakening, her epiphany. The farmhands, no one else understands it. So she's enlightened. The others are the profane. So there's much more to it than this. I'm just plowing over it for time reasons. But there's this really, there's this really deep theosophical Gnostic theme of self-awakening, having this adventure, going on a journey of self-revelation in this magical land. Again, this is paralleled in Lewis Carroll's Alice in Wonderland, but you have this Gnostic interpretation of of Wizard of Oz. Then you have the political allegory piled on top of it, and this is a whole chapter in cinema symbolism. I go into it much more in detail, but just right off the bat, it's the political and this initiation into the mystery Gnostic theme going on inside the Wizard of Oz.
Wow, all that going on, and I never knew it. I never knew it. That's so interesting. Of course, I haven't seen it. Oh my goodness, it's been at least probably 20 years since I've seen that film. But I will watch it again now that we've spoken, and I'm going to look for those things myself, and they do make sense, I have to say. But I would have never looked at it in quite that way. How did you happen? Were you just began noticing that you were seeing these things in film, and then you would see something else in another film, and then you started realizing that this was a common occurrence?
That's kind of exactly what happened. The way how this book was born, Cinema Symbolism, was when I was on your show last time. We were talking about the Royal Arch of Enoch, and I'm not going to go back down there, but I just got to give a little background on this because it leads to the movie book. Was the Royal Arch of Enoch was really a product of 20 years of research investigating, like secret societies, mysticism, the occult, astrology, Kabbalah, all that stuff. All that good stuff you mentioned earlier. And I really was just writing this massive book about, esoteric Western Hermeticism. And in Royal Arch, the final chapter, like I said, when I mentioned earlier, was kind of dealt with Freemasonic, Enochian solar symbolisms. And this is where I really kind of started to see it with things like the National Treasure movie. I know that has some Masonic overtones, but on a much deeper level, the first National Treasure movie is actually a Masonic ritual. It's the Royal Arch of Enoch ceremonial. It's the recovery of the secret underground treasure vault that contains all the treasure beneath the holy ground. That's the Royal Arch ritual, and of course that's the movie. That's the first National Treasure movie. And I started to see these exact same themes in the Da Vinci Code movie, which is what I describe in Royal Arch as a temple to the number 13. And again, this is paralleling this Royal Arch ritual that was originally the 13th degree in the Rite of Perfection, and it deals with wisdom and the restoration of knowledge. When you watch Da Vinci Code, every time they need a clue or they need wisdom, the number 13 will come up on the screen in one way or another. It's fascinating. It's a fascinating study. So I was beginning to see it there. And what I was really interested in the subject matter. Like I said, it was the last chapter of Royal Arch, and I was seeing this stuff in other movies, but it really wasn't necessarily Masonic per se. In some cases it was. So what I did was I took that 20 years of research and turned it on Hollywood. And like I said, I was noticing this stuff, and then I started watching the Matrix movies, which are very Gnostic, the Star Wars movies, which incorporate a lot of the works of Joseph Campbell and the monomyth and the solar allegory, the Christ-like savior figure. You'll find this character as Frodo Baggins in Lord of the Rings, Neo in the Matrix, things like that. And I just started seeing it, and you'd sit down and watch a movie, and I'd see something. And then, I kind of start watching the movie through a symbolic lens. And like I said, it would take 2 or 3 more times at least. And then you just started picking up on stuff, and it just became so obvious to me that this was being intentionally done. And the movie makers, the filmmakers, the directors, producers would give you little tip-offs of this. You would see things that would be repeating, the emphasis on a certain number. And it was just, I was just seeing it, and I had seen it enough that I knew it wasn't a coincidence at this point anymore. So I really took that 20 years of research and turned it on Hollywood. And like I said, I only talked about movies that I was absolutely certain this esoterica was being presented in.
Well, it's really interesting. It seems like, too, like you were talking about, for instance, Alice in Wonderland, Through the Looking Glass by Lewis Carroll, and how there were, in his writing, he incorporated a lot of stuff, which, I totally agree with. And then that translated into the film. But now when you're talking about the Da Vinci Code, I know that there were certainly hidden things in the Da Vinci Code. I actually made a movie about, on that subject myself. But it sounds like what you're saying is that there were things that weren't in the book that the filmmakers then added in the imagery. Like in the Da Vinci Code, I don't remember the number 13 coming up all the time unless I'm just having a brain fade. I'm not talking about the movie, I'm talking about in the book. So I would think, or it sounds like sometimes the material is embedded in the story itself, or the imagery or the symbolism. And other times it's being added after the fact into the film.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. You will find in some instances where the writer of the story, such as Ian Fleming, with the James Bond stuff, is obviously incorporating, esoterica into these books, and it turns up in the movie. But then you have, like with the Da Vinci Code, I think it's on the DVD, I have the Blu-ray here, where Howard, the director, Ron Howard, was giving an interview, and he said, when we made this, we put some stuff in the background, Like I know, a couple times when they're going to the Louvre, you see the Les Mis poster, and this is a reference to Victor Hugo, who is supposed to be in the Priory of Zion.
Right.
He said, but then we put in this really deeper, darker code. He said, in some instances, I don't even know what it is. And I documented more in the Royal Arch of Enoch, but the number 13 is just all over the place. I mean, I know just a couple off the top of my head was the Mona Lisa was kept in Hall 13 in the Louvre. They show you that in the elevator. The one part where the keystone is in the back of the van, and of course a keystone comes straight out of Royal Arch symbology. You can't have an archway without a keystone. The time on the clock is 1:12. If you add that together, you get 13. There's other derivatives of the number 13 in that film. It's escaping me. But then you also have, I mean, clearly this is not in the book. This is something that was added later. And you'll find this in The Shining with Kubrick. I mean, the level that Kubrick went to add repetition and repeating numbers, and none of this is in the book, and to symbolize the reincarnation going on in the Overlook is so overwhelming that you can almost craft the argument that Kubrick forgot to tell the movie, or forgot to make a horror movie. Stephen King couldn't stand Kubrick's version of The Shining, and The Shining is nothing more. I mean, it's a great movie, but the levels that Kubrick goes to incorporate repetition and repeating numbers in that movie is so off the chart. And we could do a show on that by itself. I mean, clearly this is not something in the book at all. So it works both ways. You will find like what we were talking about with Baum's Wizard of Oz. You will find these themes in the Wizard of Oz, and they translate into the movies. But yeah, I mean, oftentimes you will find a filmmaker who gets a hold of a book and makes it into a movie and just puts his own stamp on it. This is not uncommon.
Right. Yeah. It's a couple of layers there, because there may be secret images that the writer is embedding in the story itself, and then there could be other layers added by the filmmakers as they produce the film, I would think. Now you mentioned Ian Fleming a minute ago with the Bond movies and the Bond stories. Now, when I was looking into your material, I saw that Ian Fleming was friends with Aleister Crowley. Is that right?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Crowley worked in British intelligence during World War I and World War II. And during World War II, the person who oversaw Crowley was none other than Ian Fleming, who, of course, went on to write the James Bond stories. And you will find this very hermetic occult influence on Fleming via Crowley. Another person who moved in this exact same circle and was in British intelligence was a man named Dennis Wheatley. And Wheatley wrote a story called The Devil Rides Out. And Wheatley incorporates a character in that story. It turns up in the movie that was made in the 1960s called Mokata, who is clearly based upon Aleister Crowley. So you'll find this very hermetic and occult influence. I mean, I see we're getting to the top of the hour just real quick.
Yeah.
The 007 sigil of James Bond is a reference to an English spy master named Dr. John Dee, who was Queen Elizabeth's court astrologer. Sure. It's a fascinating story, and maybe talk about it more after the break.
Let's do.
Yeah. I mean, no, the material with Fleming is uncanny with Crowley.
Yeah, let's do that. Let's get back into Ian Fleming and Aleister Crowley. When we come back, you're listening to my guest, Robert Sullivan. He's talking about his latest book, Cinema Symbolism. And if you'll hang in there with us, we'll be right back.
Hello, everyone. Lorian Fenton here, host of the California MUFON radio show, asking if you'd like special access to exclusive and amazing information about UFOs, the paranormal, and all things unexplained. If you're nodding yes, then join IRN's Insider Club. As an Insider Club member, you'll get an all-access pass to premier Inception Radio Network content for only $4.99 a month. This includes live UFO and paranormal conferences, live streaming UFO skywatches, exclusive IRN radio and TV productions, and of course, paying radio with MJ and Ken Storch. So don't wait any longer. Visit InceptionRadioNetwork.com and click on Member Login to join IRN's Insider Club and get your VIP access today.
Are you a fan of Inception Radio Network? Do you reckon it's the best alternative talk radio station on the planet? Well, if you do, head to facebook.com/Inception Radio Network and like the page. Tell your friends, spread the word, and keep listening to the best. Do you have a smartphone? If so, Inception Radio Network is the best app for you. Available on iTunes, Android, Samsung, and most other app stores. Just search Inception Radio Network. With the app you can listen live, check out podcasts of recent and past shows, view our videos, see what shows are coming up, who the guests are, and, via the chat room, send live questions to those guests. You know it makes sense. Check your app store now. Inception Radio Network. I'll see you there.
Hey IRN listeners, make sure you tune in to Night Vision Radio with René Barnett. René will be exposing the truth one secret at a time. When? Thursdays. Every Thursday, 10:30 p.m. Eastern, 7:30 p.m. Pacific. Where? Right here on IRN.
You're locked into Inception Radio Network, Superior, Wisconsin.
Welcome back. If you're just joining us, this is Night Vision Radio. I'm your host, René Barnett. My guest tonight is Robert Sullivan IV, and we're talking about hidden esoteric messages or symbols in Hollywood films and his new book, Cinema Symbolism. Now, before we carry on with our interesting conversation that we were having about Ian Fleming movies and his relationship with Aleister Crowley and the esoteric, I want to remind everyone to have a look at Robert's website. It's Robert Sullivan, Roman numeral 4, robertsullivan.iv.com, and have a look and see if you can. Oh, goodness, somebody's trying to Skype me. That's just rude. Anyhow, sorry about that, folks. All right, so Robert, we're back. Now, we were talking about Ian Fleming and his relationship with Aleister Crowley and the esoteric. So please do carry on.
Yeah, absolutely. You have the entire thing with James Bond with the sigil of 007. This is a reference to an English astrologer and spy master named Dr. John Dee. He developed the system of conjuring demons and angels. It's called Enochian magic with a guy named Edward Kelly. But he served as Queen Elizabeth I court astrologer. He's the guy who came up with the date of January 15th, 1559 for her to be coronated on, and said if you get coronated on this date, you'll have this great golden reign. And of course she did. That date has very significant meaning, but we won't get into that tonight. But at any rate, and of course what happened was the Queen was persona non grata with a lot of Roman Catholics, the Jesuits. So a man named Sir Francis Walsingham crafted the spy ring around Queen Elizabeth. And the people involved with this were like Sir Walter Raleigh, Drake, Dee, Kelly, people like that. Giordano Bruno, believe it or not, was involved with this. And when Dee would write an espionage correspondence when he would be in the Holy Roman Empire, and he wanted her to see, he would sign the letter 007, and the actual sigil was meant to look like eyeglasses, meaning that the correspondence was for her eyes only, or that he was her eyes in the field. I mean, this is of course where you get the idea for your eyes only comes from. At any rate, this is Fleming pays references Dee by making James Bond 007, and with Fleming, he oversaw the one of the people that was under him was Aleister Crowley. Just an interesting story. When Rudolf Hess, Hitler's deputy, flew to England or flew to Scotland on this botched peace effort to try to broker peace with England right at the beginning of World War II. They captured Hess and they threw him in the Tower of London. Hess was into astrology and the occult. It was well known at the time that a lot of the Nazi hierarchy was as well, people like Hitler, Himmler, Goebbels. And Crowley went to Ian Fleming and said, listen, he said, you got Rudolf Hess in the Tower of London. He said, let me go in there. Let me interrogate the guy. I'll do some Ars Goetia, summoning. I'll conjure a demon in front of this guy. We'll scare him to death. And we'll maybe get him to talk about some of the Nazis' proclivities, about the occult and astrology, their weaknesses, and we can use it against them. Fleming thought it was a great idea and actually went to Winston Churchill with it, but it was ultimately vetoed by Churchill. But that's a true story. And with Crowley, I'll go into this story real quick. I'll get to James Bond in a second, but Crowley, this has always been chalked up as Aleister Crowley just being a joker, 666 being 666. He used to throw these dinner parties, and he would cook like a chicken vindaloo, which is a super spicy Indian dish, and he'd tell the people eating it was super mild, and of course it would blow their heads off. And then he would lace their drinks with psychotronic drugs, things like mescaline, LSD, and he would sit back and take notes as to their reaction on, how they reacted. And again, this has always been written off as this is just Crowley being a joker and messing around with people. It turns out that this was actually intentionally done by Crowley, and he was intentionally doing this at the behest of the British government. And what he was trying to do was test the effects, again, of psychedelic drugs on an unsuspecting person, an unsuspecting populace. And the person who seems to be behind this, believe it or not, was none other than Winston Churchill. And when Crowley eventually died at the end of World War II, it was Churchill who went into MI5 and MI6 and had all of Crowley's records destroyed. And this whole dietary drug testing thing with Crowley was really what you call the forerunner of CIA's MK-Ultra. So you had this real, espionage activity with Crowley and Churchill and Fleming. But you find with Fleming's interaction through Crowley, this very hermetic occult theme that turns up in the Bond stories in general. I mean, a lot of them are the same story over and over again, where you have Bond, he gets the mission. You have James Bond as sort of the solar masculine figure. He gets the mission. He has to go against this, this evil demiurge, over-the-top villain, whether it's the alchemist or a Goldfinger who wants to transmute base metal to gold, or alternatively, alchemically affect the gold in Fort Knox to make it worthless and make his gold worth more. This is where he has the nuclear dirty bomb, which would be the Philosopher's Stone. Or you have Hugo Drax, the dragon, the Illuminati character who wants to take over the world, Ernst Stavro Blofeld, who's head of this group called Spectre. So you have Bond. He gets the mission. Then he goes to the Hermes Trismegistus wizard character, who always provides the sacred information to Bond, which in the Bond stories is always this magical gadget, this piece of wizardry that always winds up saving his life. So then he goes on the mission. He encounters the evil demiurge villain, whoever this is. And he can't defeat him until he has to encounter the Bond girl. He has to unify with her. She's, of course, the moon to his sun. This is what the Rosicrucians call the alchemical wedding. And then once this is achieved, Bond then is spiritually able to go on and topple the evil villain. The end. So you have this very hermetic, alchemical Rosicrucian theme going on in the James Bond stories. Of course, the sacred feminine I mean, this is, no shocker. The name of this person is always, the name of the woman is always overwrought with female sexuality of some sort. You have a lot of alchemical themes going on in things like Goldfinger, where he's trying to transmute the gold in Fort Knox to make it worthless. And, of course, to do this, he needs the Philosopher's Stone, which is the nuclear dirty bomb, and even the name Auric Goldfinger, AU, which is the chemical symbol of gold. And his license plate is AU1. So you have these very occult themes going on in the James Bond stories, and, of course, the reference with D. I get into it much more in the book, but, you have this very hermetic influence, occult influence coming into the world of Fleming through Crowley. And another guy who moved in the circle, I mentioned Wheatley before the break, was a guy named Ronald Dahl. Dahl wrote a book called Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. He moved in the same circle with Crowley and Fleming and Wheatley. And believe it or not, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory also has a lot of hermetical themes in it. You have the wizard in the Chocolate Factory with the sacred knowledge. And Dahl actually transformed one of Fleming's books, Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. He actually wrote the screenplay for it. So you have this, circle coming, with Dahl, Wheatley, Fleming, and this very occult, esoteric influence coming onto them from Aleister Crowley.
Wow. Now that is very wild. I'm thinking, I can't quit thinking about what you said about Rudolf Hess being in the Tower of London and Aleister Crowley wanting to go in and summon a demon to scare him and I guess get information out of him or whatever. But, I've heard stories of people that could do such a thing, these alchemists and black magicians and that sort of thing, to actually be able to conjure something up that, in the room with you. Do you think that's really possible? Do you think it would have been really possible for him to do that? And do you think that Winston Churchill believed he was really going to do that and that's why he nixed it, or?
Well, yeah, Crowley has this comes out of the teachings and the writings of Aleister Crowley and his involvement with groups like the Golden Dawn, the OTO. Crowley was a Freemason, but he's not well known for that. But Crowley, whether you want to believe him or not, has claimed numerous times to summon demons, these entities coming out of books like Ars Goetia, The Sacred Magic of Abramelin the Mage.
Abramelin the Mage, exactly.
Yeah, that's an interesting story with that one. Crowley went off to this house in Loch Ness called Boleskine House, or Boleskine House. I've heard it pronounced both ways, where he was doing this magic called the Sacred Magic about Abramelin the Mage. And this is where really Crowley gets his dark reputation. Crowley viewed himself, believe it or not, and this is going to come as a surprise, Crowley himself viewed himself as a white magician. He viewed himself as a good guy. He did not view himself at all as a black magician, but he gets this dark reputation from doing these rites called the, as you said, the rites of Abramelin the Mage. And part of this summoning ritual is binding these hierarchies of hell, demons like Lucifuge, Rofacal, Belial, and binding them and getting them to do your will. He's doing this at this house at Loch Ness. He breaks off the ritual. There's various reasons why. Some people say he had to go on Golden Dawn business. Some say he got into an argument with a guy named McGregor Mathers, and he had to go feud with him. Some claim that he just got bored with the ritual and just gave it up. But he was doing these rites. And he claims to have summoned this stuff. He wrote the introduction to the modern copies of Ars Goetia, the Lesser Key of Solomon, which is this book, this book on how to summon these 72 demons.
I have a copy of that.
Yeah, right, which he claims to have. Whether you want to believe it or not is up really to you. But he, or to the person listening. But he claims to have done this, and certainly Winston Churchill took this seriously enough. Churchill was a Freemason himself. So, Crowley had came up with this idea with Hess to try to, perform some sort of Goetia magic in front of him. And like I said, Fleming thought it was a good idea. But against, Churchill eventually ixnated, or didn't want to do it. But, it's a fascinating story. It comes definitely out of the realm of you can't make this stuff up. Just to wind up on this, end up on this. The house at Loch Ness, Boleskine House or Boleskine House. This is the house that was ultimately purchased in the early 1970s by Aleister Crowley enthusiast Jimmy Page.
Oh yeah.
The guitarist for Led Zeppelin. Yep, and Led Zeppelin. Page spent numerous nights in the house. Page wound up selling the house in the early 90s, around 1990, 1991. But Jimmy Page had claimed that the house was possessed, that it was haunted, and he chalked this up on Crowley's summoning magic there. And Page claimed to have seen ghosts and severed heads floating around, and said this was all the work of Aleister Crowley.
Wow, I wonder if that's true. Now, is Jimmy Page still alive?
Yeah, he's still alive.
Oh, I'm going to have to try to track him down. It'd be fun to get him on to talk about that house.
He's very coy. Yeah, he's very coy. He's very coy about Aleister Crowley. He's a big Aleister Crowley enthusiast. A lot of the Led Zeppelin. I mean, forget the backward masking and Stairway to Heaven.
Right.
But a lot of the Led Zeppelin albums. I mean, I forget which one it is. Has the tarot card of the Hermit on it. This is something I also talk about briefly. And you mentioned about other mediums. I mean, you'll find occult symbolism on. Even Beatles, Sgt. Pepper. Aleister Crowley's on the cover of that. A lot of people may not be aware of it. But yeah, I mean, even in the music industry and music videos and TV shows, you'll find this esoterica, and I talk about it much more in the book.
Well, Crowley certainly had some wide influence. You obviously influenced L. Ron Hubbard and in his endeavors and in Scientology. You're talking about he was involved with Ian Fleming, even knew people like Winston Churchill and moved in those circles. It's amazing. And he did have people like the band Led Zeppelin and others. And like you said, he was even on Sgt. Pepper. There was a lot of images on that album cover. So you might have missed him, but he was there. So it does seem like he had quite a lot of influence and still does to this day, which is kind of amazing.
Oh, yeah.
It's weird, though, that you said he viewed himself as a white magician. And I mean, because in his images and his pictures, it looked like he went out of his way to look kind of dark and foreboding.
Yeah, he viewed himself as the good guy. He does do rituals that would definitely be considered black magic, but he would say to you, well, I'm doing it to gain knowledge, so that's okay. I'm doing it for a pure reason. And if you read the works of medieval Renaissance guys like, alchemists and Kabbalists, they kind of say the same thing. They said if you're conjuring, this comes out of the world of Cornelius Agrippa. He wrote a book called 3 Books of Occult Philosophy. This is back in the, medieval Renaissance tradition of this. And, he says it in the book. He said, if you're summoning a demon, but you're using the demon for a positive reason, it's okay. So, whether you want to buy into that. But yeah, Crowley views himself as the white magician. Just real quick, you're absolutely right with his influence. There's a lot of people who are into Aleister Crowley. You're absolutely right with L. Ron Hubbard, Jack Parsons, Marjorie Cameron, the whole Babylon working thing with them. That's all, the following the teachings of Crowley. But he wrote a novel called Moonchild. And in it, he had a big time falling out with, he was a member of this group called the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, which is basically just a much more esoteric occult version of Freemasonry. And they incorporate much more Kabbalistic, astrological, tarot card, than Masonry does. But it's basically, it has the Masonic structure to it. And he had a big time falling out with these two guys who were in charge of it, McGregor Mathers and A.E. Waite. A.E. Waite was also a Freemason. He wrote a book, a Masonic encyclopedia. But Crowley had a big time falling out with these guys. We know the name A.E. Waite from the tarot deck, right? Absolutely. Yep, that's it. Yep. He's the Waite and Rider-Waite tarot deck. That's absolutely right. And Crowley had a falling out with these guys. Make a long story short, Crowley wrote a novel called Moonchild, which has to do with the birth of this magical baby. And the baby is being battled over by a group of black magicians and white magicians. And of course, the head of the white magic cult, the head of the white magicians is Crowley. He calls himself Simon If in the book, and the black magicians, the evil guys, are McGregor, Mathers, and A.E. Waite. I forget the name he gives to Mathers, but the name of the A.E. Waite character is Eighth Waite. That's kind of an obvious reference. So yeah, I mean, just, you know, Crowley kind of sees himself as a white magician, but I mean, let's be brutally honest. I mean, the guy is very sardonic. I mean, was into some dark magics, and I mean that's completely irrefutable. But I mean, he's a weird guy. You know, I mean, he was super intelligent. You know, a great symbolist, understood all this esoterica. But he had a very, you know, he was just a weird guy. He had a character trait, probably you want to call it a character flaw. He had this proclivity for dumping on people that seemed to genuinely care about him. He did it his whole life. Why he did that is anyone's guess. Some even now are suggesting that this was part of his espionage, that he would butter himself up to somebody, and then once the person, you know, use ran out or had nothing more to give to him, or he had no more knowledge to glean from them, you know, he just threw them under the bus. And this could have also been part of his espionage. We'll probably never know.
Yeah, absolutely. So now let's move to another film that you'd like to speak about. Did you want to talk more about The Matrix, or would you rather get into something else? It's up to you.
No, we could do a little bit on The Matrix. The Matrix.
I know a lot of people were interested in that.
Yeah, I mean, you ask me if you ask me about a movie and I haven't seen it, that's the worst case scenarios, and I'll just tell you I haven't seen it. But no, The Matrix is something. The three Matrix movies are movies that I took on in cinema symbolism. These are very Gnostic movies, especially the first Matrix movie, where you have the entire. Again, you know, I'm going to try to go through this as quickly as possible. I know I'll be leaving a lot out. But you have the idea, you know, within the Gnostic religion of the material world, you know, and the idea is that the material world and materialism is evil. It's the falsehood, and this is again the works of this lesser god called the demiurge, and that you should shrug this off and pursue truth and spirituality and spiritual growth. And you know, by doing this, by rejecting materialism, you live in a state of poverty. So you have, you know, and I'll explain this more as I go along. You have in the Matrix, you have Neo, who, you know, realizes he's in this phony world. It's no good. And he wants to leave it. And he wants to be wiser. He wants to be spiritual. So he goes into the quasi-Masonic temple with Trinity. I mean, of course, the name Trinity is completely Gnostic. This is his sacred feminine. And, you know, this comes out of the world of the Nag Hammadi Gnostic library, where the Holy Trinity was, one of the elements was Sophia, which is divine wisdom. So he goes with the divine wisdom, Sophia Trinity, to this Masonic temple, goes up the flight of steps to meet Morpheus. Part of Gnosticism is dualism, you know, man and woman, sun and moon, good and evil. So, of course, the name Morpheus is dualistic. In mythology, Morpheus is the god of dreams and sleep. Yet it's going to be Morpheus who pulls Neo out of the phony world, out of the sleep, and wake him up to the real world. So he takes the red pill. He becomes Alice in Wonderland. He goes through the looking glass. He wakes up in the real world. He gets flushed down the toilet by the machines. And he gets lifted cruciform up towards the light, into the belly of the Nebuchadnezzar. This is announcing Neo is going to be this Christ-like savior of mankind. He's the guy who's going to bring gnosis, revelation to mankind. This is, you get into the idea of Luke Skywalker, Frodo Baggins, the Christ figure, the Christ savior archetype. This is Neo in the Matrix movies. This is confirmed when he's on board the ship, and this is in the first Matrix. He goes into the bridge, and you'll see the nameplate, the manufacturer plate of the Nebuchadnezzar, and it says Mark 3:11. That's a reference to the biblical verse Mark 3:11, which is "Thou art the Son of Man, and all dark demons bow down before you." So this is announcing Neo as this Christ-like savior. You get into other Gnostic themes of the idea of the crew of the ship living in poverty, but they're spiritual. They're awake. They've received gnosis. They've shrugged off the material world. This comes from the world of a Gnostic teacher known as Valentinius. And then you also have this other Gnostic teacher named Mani. He taught this vast system of cosmology, which is basically good and evil, light and dark. So you have the good guys versus the evil machines, light versus dark. This is Star Wars, the dark and light side of the Force. It's the same thing. And then you have the idea of the demiurge, the creator of the false world. This turns up in the second movie. This is the architect of all things, and part of Gnosticism was that helping the demiurge is this group of angels called the archons, and they're sort of the enforcers of the architect. These are the agents in the Matrix movie. And then I'm just plowing through this. Believe me, there's a whole hell of a lot more to this. But you have the whole Neo as the Jesus figure being killed and resurrected with the help of the sacred feminine. So, of course, he's born again. And then what happens at the end of the movie? He ascends into heaven like Jesus. So you have the entire thing of this Gnostic fable of coming to gnosis, of coming to knowledge, shrugging off the real world, embracing the spiritual world. And in doing so, Neo has the divine spark within him lit. And again, this is part of the Gnostic teachings of the Nag Hammadi library. You'll find this in the Gospel of Thomas, where Neo now has this divine purpose to defeat the machines, and go on and become the savior of mankind. You have some very interesting you mentioned numerology earlier. You have some very interesting numerological references in the Matrix, and this is probably one of the darkest 9/11 references. Pre-9/11 reference is Neo's passport when he's being interrogated by Smith at the beginning of the movie. Neo's passport actually expires on September 11th, 2001. And that's very hard.
This was before 9/11?
Yeah, that's right. The Matrix movie came out in 1999. And if you watch the movie, there's a scene where they flash Neo's passport, and there's two dates on it. It's his birth date, which has meaning, which has a dualistic meaning, and the expiration date. The birth date of Neo is September 13th, 1971, which is dualistic. That's the date of the Attica prison riots where the state suppressed the prisoners, but it's the birthday of the savior who's going to free the prisoners, mankind, from the Matrix. And then the expiration date of the passport is none other than September 11th, 2001. This came out in 1999. So, you have this very deep, dark reference to 9/11.
That's kind of mind-blowing. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. It's hard to reconcile.
Do you have an explanation for that?
There's only one of three ways to write it off. One is it's a coincidence, which, the fact that it's the whole date is hard to do, and especially when you're dealing with themes of 9/11, and this is what really the movie revolves around, is the idea of the death of the old world, the start of the new world. You get into the idea of a new solar savior, the end of Pisces, the start of Aquarius. So then you have the idea that it's a dark conspiracy, that it's being put in there on purpose. I don't know if I'm ready to buy into that yet. Then the other alternative is you have
collective
the idea.
Unconscious.
Well, you have the collective unconscious, but then you have to. That begs the argument is not. The idea of the collective unconscious is that it's inherited. It's in the past, but then you have to. Then you're confronted with the idea: is the collective unconscious tapping into the future as well? Is the collective unconscious not only echoing the past, but can serve as a vehicle as a prophetic device almost? And that's a fascinating subject matter. And you get into movies as prophecy. That's another talking point. You'll find some really screwy things going on with movies as prophecy. Believe me, this comes straight out of the book of You Can't Make This Stuff Up. But by far and away, the most scariest and dangerous, not pre-9/11 reference, without question, is Neo's passport in the Matrix.
Wow. That is just, that really is mind-blowing. I'm going to have to try to find a screen grab of that just to have a look at it.
Oh, it's definitely there. No, it's definitely there.
I'm sure it is. I just want to see it. It just sounds crazy.
If you go to Google, just go to Google, type in Matrix Neo passport. Believe me, you'll get hits on it.
Oh, okay, great. Well, you know what? I think it's a good time to take another break, and then we'll head on into the last half hour of the show. We're talking with Robert Sullivan IV. We're talking about Cinema Symbolism, his new book. Stay there with us, please. We'll be right back.
Hello, everyone. Lorian Fenton here, host of the California MUFON radio show, asking if you'd like special access to exclusive and amazing information about UFOs, the paranormal, and all things unexplained. If you're nodding yes, then join IRN's Insider Club. As an Insider Club member, you'll get an all-access pass to premier Inception Radio Network content for only $4.99 a month. This includes live UFO and paranormal conferences, live streaming UFO skywatches, exclusive IRN radio and TV productions, and of course, paying radio with MJ and Ken Storch. So don't wait any longer. Visit InceptionRadioNetwork.com and click on Member Login to join IRN's Insider Club and get your VIP access today.
Are you a fan of Inception Radio Network? Do you reckon it's the best alternative talk radio station on the planet? Well, if you do, head to facebook.com/Inception Radio Network and like the page. Tell your friends, spread the word, and keep listening to the best. Do you have a smartphone? If so, Inception Radio Network is the best app for you. Available on iTunes, Android, Samsung, and most other app stores. Just search Inception Radio Network. With the app you can listen live, check out podcasts of recent and past shows, view our videos, see what shows are coming up, who the guests are, and, via the chat room, send live questions to those guests. You know it makes sense. Check your app store now. Inception Radio Network. I'll see you there.
Don't have a computer? Is your internet connection down? Don't worry. Use your trusty cell phone or landline and call into our listen line at 401-283-6700 to listen to the Inception Radio Network 24/7. Again, that call-in number is 401-283-6700. For the Inception Radio Network, I am MJ.
Hey, IRN listeners, make sure you tune in to Night Vision Radio with René Barnett. René will be exposing the truth one secret at a time. When? Thursdays. Every Thursday, 10:30 p.m. Eastern, 7:30 p.m. Pacific. Where? Right here on IRN.
You're locked into Inception Radio Network, Superior, Wisconsin.
You're listening to Night Vision Radio. If you're just joining us, we're talking with Robert Sullivan IV, author of Cinema Symbolism. We're talking about hidden messages in Hollywood movies. Robert, there was a movie that I saw when it first came out, and it had this profound effect on me. It was absolutely horrifying. And I'm talking about The Exorcist. And when I saw it, of course, it's been a long, long time ago, and I was much, much younger then. But it scared the bejesus out of me. I was afraid to go to sleep at night because I was afraid that I was going to get possessed. And I warned everyone I knew not to see it. And in fact, my husband actually fainted in The Exorcist. It was hilarious. He got up to leave, and he only made it through about the first quarter of the movie. And I was escorting him up the aisle, and I kept noticing him getting shorter and shorter and shorter until he finally just hit the ground. They actually had nurses on duty. This was a big publicity thing. I lived in Tulsa, Oklahoma at the time, and I saw it at the Bowman Twin Theater. They had a nurse on duty, and she actually came up and ministered to my poor passed out husband. I had to take him home, but I actually had already seen the movie. He didn't believe how scary it was, so I made him go. And then, of course, he never said another word about it after that. But, I mean, the stuff in there was pretty well all in your face. So what was hidden in there?
Well, you have a lot of hidden themes in that movie that Friedkin and techniques that Friedkin employs with this. You have the idea of, I'll start broadly and I'll try to get smaller. You have the entire idea of the girl and Georgetown in general, which is where most of the movie takes place. The girl living with the mother in Georgetown. The idea of darkness invading the town, the campus, and eventually the house, and her, of course, she gets possessed. And of course, you have darkness associates with evil. So how do they kind of convey this to you? And he does Friedkin does really this neat trick with this. He doesn't flash it on the screen, but the idea that that this is something a lot of movie makers play around with is weather, and the time of the year. And what you have in The Exorcist is when the actress is walking home from the photo shoot, she's accosted by trick-or-treaters. So this is putting in your unconscious mind that it's Halloween. And Halloween, of course, is the halfway point between the autumn equinox and the winter solstice, when the days in the northern hemisphere where light, i.e., divine light, is decreased and darkness or evil is exalted. So what he's doing by showing you that is telling you that darkness is coming, that that darkness is on its way. Believe it or not, and I'll just fast forward, I'll get back to The Exorcist in a minute. Stanley Kubrick does this exact same trick in the Shining movie. When Jack Torrance gets to the hotel, the Ullman, the hotel manager, tells him that the hotel closes on October 30th. And so that when they arrive at the hotel, it's Halloween. And again, this is the darkness coming. It's the darker half of the year. This is why all the ghosts and the demons come out in the Overlook to play, because darkness is exalted in the northern hemisphere. It's the same thing in The Omen, in the Exorcist. By planting that in there, he's telling you that darkness is on its way. Then you have the idea, or the character of Damien Karras, the Jesuit priest. He is going to be the little girl's Christ Savior. He's going to exorcise the demon from her. He is going to become her personal God. This is what's called apotheosis. And to symbolize this, Friedkin does a couple unique things on this. One is he constantly is showing you Karras in a state of ascension. If you pay attention to the movie, Karras is always moving up hills, up stairways, and in fact, when he's introduced into the movie, he's actually coming up from a street onto a subway platform. And to announce Karras as the Christ figure, as the apotheosis, the person who's going to become the girl's apotheos savior, he comes up from 33rd Street, of all things. And, of course, 33rd is a reference to Jesus Christ. That's how many years Christ was on earth. It was 33 years. And then, of course, but Karras is always in a state of doubt. He's doubting his religion. And this is symbolized at the end when he gets killed. He falls down the flight of steps, despite the fact he saved the girl, but to symbolize his doubt that permeates the whole film, he falls down the flight of steps. And, in fact, when Karras is introduced coming up from 33rd Street, he goes into his mother's house. You pay attention, spray painted on the wall outside the mother's house is the word quit, which is actually symbolizing his doubt that permeates the whole movie. Exactly. Mm-hmm. Then you have and I'm jumping around a little bit here, but then you have Karras who exorcises the girl. when he's laying at the bottom of the steps at the end, dying. You'll see spray painted on the wall next to him on the left side, pigs. This is a reference to the gospel tale of Jesus exorcising the demon from the man and casting it into a herd of pigs. So we know the exorcism is successful. We know that Karras has gotten the demon out, although it's cost him his own life. And again, his doubt is symbolized by him going down the flight of steps. You have the whole idea of light versus dark in this movie. And of course, you have the girl being invaded by darkness. And so how does the mother how's the mother going to cast the darkness out? She calls in the sun priests, the two Jesuits. And of course, the symbol for the Jesuits is the sun. So you have, light versus dark, the sun priests who are going to cast out the evil demon from the little girl. You have some very other veiled imagery going on in The Exorcist that's very unique. The one scene comes to mind where Chris McNeil is sitting at the institution with the doctors, and they've given up. They don't know what's wrong with the little girl. This is where she's becoming possessed, and it's getting worse and worse. And the one doctor says something to the effect of, it's some sort of somnambular sleep disorder, possession disorder. We don't know what it is. And this is where, Chris is really giving up. And finally the doctor says, have you ever thought of exorcism? And you're going to need a spiritual cure for this little girl. If you pay attention to that scene, and this is where really Chris comes to the conclusion that a spiritual cure is needed for the daughter. What Friedkin does is he does something that's very unique. He actually replicates Da Vinci's Last Supper painting in that scene where you have Chris, the mother, as Christ sitting at the head of the table, and she's surrounded by four groups of three doctors. And what this is symbolizing is that, the spiritual cure is needed for the little girl. And actually, Chris even confirms this even further. I can't repeat the word because, I just can't. But she says something to the effect of 88 doctors here and all of your, no one can help me. It's an interesting, she would pick the number 88 because in Greek gematria, the number 888 is actually Jesus Christ. So you have that's going on. You have that veiled reference, and this is going on again where Friedkin is symbolically creating this Last Supper scene. So in the Exorcist movie, you have this whole idea of apotheosis, ascension, the light versus darkness, and some just very adroitly concealed subliminal messaging going on with the trick-or-treaters, with the Last Supper painting to convey this overarching religious struggle of light versus dark, call it Manichaean cosmology. Of course, in Christianity, this is God versus the devil, light versus dark, Jesus versus the demons, and going on in The Exorcist. You'll find that a lot of these same techniques, the same arcana, the same symbolism being used in the movie, believe it or not, Gangs of New York, the Martin Scorsese movie. Scorsese uses similar techniques to imbue the movie with this whole overarching religious theme of Amsterdam Vallen versus Bill Cutting, at God versus the devil, good versus evil. It's a fascinating study. Gangs of New York is actually a movie I'm taking on in cinema symbolism too. But if you're interested in The Exorcist, there's more to it. I get into it more into the book. Cinema symbolism, I have a whole chapter on The Exorcist. In fact, it's the first chapter of the book.
Right. Now, you just mentioned cinema symbolism too. So you are in the process of writing a second volume.
Yes, that's absolutely right, René. When I was writing cinema symbolism, what happened was I took on these three movie series that involve a ton of arcana. Joseph Campbell's Monomyth, which is the solar journey, just a lot of mystical themes, religious themes. I took on all 6 of the Star Wars movies, both trilogies. I took on the Matrix movies, and then I took on the Lord of the Rings movies. My original plan was, after that, I was going to take on the 8 Harry Potter movies, because this also ties into the Christ figure, the Harry Potter going against the evil Lord, the evil Dark Lord. But I thought, I thought this book will never end. I mean, there was just no way I could, there's just no way in hell I can take on 8 Harry Potter movies. So again, the light bulb went off over my head. Okay, I thought, Well, rather than do that, let's just take the Harry Potter material out, and I'll do another book. I'll just do Cinema Symbolism 2. I can't throw everything in this one, so that's what I'm doing. I'm writing Cinema Symbolism 2 as we speak, and I'm doing the Harry Potter material. I'm taking on the C.S. Lewis material, the Tolkien material I did in Cinema Symbolism, the one that's out now. But I'll probably get into some of the stuff with The Hobbit, with Tolkien, but I'm going to do the C.S. Lewis material. Other movies that I'm doing are some of the Alan Moore material, things like V for Vendetta, From Hell, Watchmen. I'm revisiting. I'm trying to think of some of The Shining. I'm revisiting The Shining. The Shining is a movie that I take on briefly in Cinema Symbolism. I go much more in depth with this in Cinema Symbolism 2. And yeah, you're right. This is a book that I'm working on right now.
Wow. Now, I want to lighten things up toward the end of the show here and talk about Monty Python and the Holy Grail. But before we do, if I could throw a quick question to you from the chat room.
Sure.
Neutron wants to know if you've ever gotten into some of the Alice Bailey stuff, like initiation, and have you drawn any conclusions or any tie-ins with any films with the Alice Bailey material? I know you mentioned Helena Blavatsky earlier.
Yeah, no. Well, Blavatsky was the founder of Theosophy. Alice Bailey and what's her name, Annie Besant, were sort of like Blavatsky disciples.
Yep.
So it's sort of paralleling the same material. Sort of. I'm familiar who Alice Bailey is, but I don't really. I really take more of a theosophical Gnostic theme than I would say of Alice Bailey.
I see. I mean, probably some of her views might be encompassed in that Blavatsky material, since she was.
Absolutely. No, exactly correct. Correct.
Okay, so the Holy Grail, Monty Python, the funniest movie I ever saw in my entire life. I think I saw it like 1,000,000 times when it was on cable television, when cable television was brand new back in the 70s, 80s. And I remember we had a channel called the Z Channel, which was movies, and they showed Monty Python and the Holy Grail, and I watched it over and over again. It was so hilarious. But what was hidden in there? Of course, we have the Grail symbology, but what might I have missed?
Well, the whole King Arthur story is a solar allegory, where King Arthur is the sun, and then of course Queen Guinevere is the moon, and then the Knights of the Round Table. The table is round, symbolizing the zodiac wheel, and the knights are the houses of the zodiac that help him. Leo, is Lancelot, his favorite knight. That's the soul house of the sun. So you have with the King Arthur story, it's just this really astrotheological story. I'll get into Monty Python and the Holy Grail in a minute. If you want to see this played out, and this is a movie I took on in Royal Arch of Enoch, if you want to see the astrological symbolism surrounding the King Arthur legend, the best movie for it is Excalibur, the John Borman movie. That is without question the best movie for the astrological motifs, with King Arthur as the sun. He draws the sword from the stone on Easter Sunday. The sword is the Excalibur. That's the sun ray. The sun is drawing the sword from the stone. This is in Christianity, where the stone is rolled away and Jesus emerges from the tomb. And you have the whole idea of when King Arthur is weak and dying. This is, again, the autumn months where Scorpio is exalted, and that's who Mordred is. That's why Mordred doesn't carry the sword. He carries the spear, which is the scorpion stinger. Since the sun is in that house, he wears the golden armor. So you have this entire deep astrological motif going on in the Arthurian legend. You want to see it. It's in Excalibur. It's the best movie. But again, these motifs turn up in Monty Python and the Holy Grail. It is, after all, a King Arthur story. And you have within the Monty Python troupe, I should mention Terry Gilliam, who is very interested in Gnosticism, mysticism. You'll find a lot of his movies incorporate these themes. For example, 12 Monkeys, where you have the Christ figure, James Cole, JC, Jesus Christ, coming back in time, looking for the 12 houses of the zodiac, the 12 monkeys, in order to save mankind from itself. And movies like Brazil, Baron Munchausen, again, very Gnostic, very hermetical in nature. I mean, with Holy Grail, I mean, you have King Arthur as the sun, is a representation of the representation of the sun. If you think I'm stretching this point, take a look at the movie and take a look at the emblem on King Arthur's chest and on his banner when he's hopping around with the two coconuts. Even Patsy has it. Even Patsy has it on his tunic. Take a look at what that symbol is if you want to know who or what King Arthur symbolizes. And then you have, of course, you have some very interesting esoterica going on. I mean, you have the whole thing of night versus day, good versus darkness, the black night going against the sun. And of course, you can't have darkness without, you can't have darkness without light. So they can't defeat each other. They have a draw. Then you've got the one knight who is the wise man. There's no Merlin. The Merlin guy is excised out of, Excalibur. So the wizard character is Sir Bedivere, and of course his coat of arms is the tree, which is the Kabbalistic tree of life. So he's the wise guy. He's the guy who has all the knowledge. And then you'll find some very astrological motifs going on with signs of the zodiac and opposite signs where you have the Gemini, the twins guarding Sagittarius, the little guy shooting the arrow out the window. And then you have when King Arthur and the knights come out of winter at the vernal equinox, they encounter who else but Ares the ram, who is Tim, who has the ram's horns on each side of his head and is fire obsessed because Ares is a fire sign. And where does he take them? He takes them to the cave, which is the little bunny rabbit. And again, this ties into spring worship with goddess figures like Astara, which has the hare head. And of course, this is where the whole thing with the Easter bunny comes from. So you'll find, again, with the Arthurian legend, these very solar astrological motifs going on. And you'll really find them more in Excalibur, but they do rub off in Monty Python and the Holy Grail. This whole thing with King Arthur being the sun and these knights being these astrological archetypes, embodiments. And you'll find it in Monty Python and the Holy Grail. It's a fascinating movie. It's one of my all-time favorite movies. And Monty Python, Life of Brian, Meaning of Life, Terry Gilliam, you'll find a lot of esoterica in his work.
Can I ask you a question, a kind of a non-sequitur here? What's your favorite film?
Oh, of all time?
Mm-hmm.
Oh boy, that's a tough one. I have so many that I like. I really, it's a movie that I take on in cinema symbolism, and again, it's very Gnostic, and it deals with a lot of secret society themes. I love Fight Club. That would probably be right up there. I love the Monty Python and the Holy Grail movie. I love the original Star Wars trilogy. I love horror movies. I love The Exorcist. The Exorcist is a phenomenal movie. And I agree with you. It's probably one of the scariest, if not the scariest movie ever made.
Ever.
Yeah, no. I mean, I like comedies. I love Caddyshack. I'm not into golf, but I mean, that movie is just great.
Okay. So did you see anything in Caddyshack?
Oh, sure. You have, with Caddyshack, you have really what you have in this is sort of this character called Loki. It's Mercurius. This is sort of the archetype who fails upward. It's the Al Chervik character. You'll find this in Fast Times at Ridgemount High with Spicoli, sort of this Joker character who can only do wrong, but the more he screws up, the better things happen to him. You'll find this archetype in a lot of movies. There's Stanley Ipkiss in The Mask. I mean, that's the whole story right there with Loki and Mercurius. So yeah, you'll find this archetypal figure in a lot of comedies. So in cinema symbolism, the final chapter of the book deals with comedies. You'll find a lot of astrological personalities, archetypes in movies like Ghostbusters, 9 to 5. Those two movies are the exact same thing, only reversed. I get into some of the stuff with, again, this Loki, trickster god, Mercurius figure, Al Chervik, Spicoli from Fast Times. The final chapter of cinema symbolism is all about comedies.
Interesting. You've made me start thinking about movies that sort of captured my imagination throughout the years and wondering, if there was something added in there that I wasn't even aware of that drew me to those particular movies. One of my favorites is an old movie. I don't know if you've seen it. My mom recommended that I watch it when I was a kid. My mom always had strange suggestions for us, but they were always really good. And it was a movie called Snake Pit with Olivia de Havilland. I don't know if you ever saw that, but she had a nervous breakdown and she was institutionalized. And I'm just thinking, that thing must be full of symbolism. I'm going to have to watch that again and see.
I mean, you're right. I mean, you said it at the beginning of the show. The symbolism it's just not in modern movies. You'll find it in Wizard of Oz. You'll find it in the Universal horror movies, certainly movies from the 50s and 60s. The book spans all sorts of genres and time frames. So, I mean, if you told me that it was a movie with Olivia de Havilland in it, that would not surprise me.
Yeah, I know. I'm just thinking of all the classic films, Gone with the Wind and films like that, I can see how, now I'm going to look at things in a different way and start to see if I can, figure out for myself, if I'm seeing something symbolic or if it's just, just what appears on the surface. It's going to be really interesting. But
it's a fascinating study, and like I said, I just took on movies that I was 100% convinced that this material was in. Just real quick, I won't go into it too long. I mean, there's been many movies I've watched where I was expecting to see, where I sat down to watch it with my symbolic lens, to pay attention to it for hidden meanings and things like that, and I found nothing. So it's not in every movie.
Oh, yeah. No, I would imagine that it's not, but I would imagine it's in a lot more than we might realize, even if it wasn't purposeful, like you said. I mean, there are different ways that it can occur, because I think maybe some of these artists might be, as you said, picking up on the collective unconscious. But in your opinion, a lot of them are purposeful, it sounds like.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I definitely think that they're using this material. It's really, like you said at the beginning, it's like a painter incorporating the golden ratio or sacred geometry into a painting or a building. It's turning the movie into a living piece of mythology. I mean, my God, I'm in my early 40s. I was born in the early 70s. I mean, there isn't a person my age who doesn't know what Star Wars is, or hasn't quoted Star Wars at some point. I mean, there you go. I mean, that's the Joseph Campbell monomyth. It's a solar allegory. It contains the entire, Manichaean scheme of light versus darkness. Luke Skywalker, I mean, his name is the sun. The name Luke comes from the Latin lux, meaning light. What light walks across the sky? The sun. In comparative religion, this is Apollo, the sun god. Who's Apollo's sister? That would be the moon, Diana. Well, who's the sister and who's Luke Skywalker's sister? Would that be the moon, Princess Leia, who's always wearing the white robes of the moon? So I mean, you will find this these themes, this mythology, these archetypes, tarot embodiment. It's when you have the eye for it, you'll definitely see it, and you will become convinced, like I, that these guys know what they're doing and they're using this material very adroitly, I might add.
We've got literally like 2 minutes left to go in the show. So can you tell us, now that we've heard you and we go to view movies, is there a way to look at movies differently? I mean, can you give us some hints on what to look for?
Well,
or how to start doing that? How to start recognizing it?
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough question to answer because my methodology is unique to it. I kind of just I took it's a result of 20 years of research, and it's really watching a movie and picking up on certain themes, character involvements. Is the characters, are they archetypes or archetypes? Is there an alchemical theme? Is there is a person transmuting? Or are they achieving gnosis? Are they wiser? Or are they trying to become something they're not? Is there a number that's being drilled into my head over and over again? Is there the name game is always a fun one. to play. You know, I mentioned Luke Skywalker. You know, we get into Fight Club with Tyler Durden, who guards the mysteries of Fight Club, which is this all-male Freemasonic secret society. You know, people trying to achieve gnosis. You know, Tyler is the guardian. You know, he keeps the people out, keeps the people in of the dojo. You know, in order to get in, you have to get through Tyler. You know, in Freemasonry, who's the guy who guards the temple? The Tyler. So you have the name game. You know, with names having dualistic meanings. Again, I got into Morpheus earlier. So it's just a whole study, and it's just paying attention. And believe you me, René, when I tell you, I mean, it's watching a movie more than at least a couple times. I cannot tell you how many times I've had to sit there, watch a movie. I'll watch it at the end, and something will happen that I say to myself, oh my God, have they done something at the beginning? Did I miss something at the beginning that this is a throwback to? Sure enough, there will be. Black Swan does this. Like I said earlier, the Stanley Kubrick The Shining movie, it's just repetition after repetition, and you're constantly bouncing around that movie, looking for things that repeat itself, and it's just a vast study. I mean, you know, like I said, it's a methodology, and it's just 20 years of research that I did that allows me to just view these movies when I want to through a symbolic lens. And it's not easy, believe me. It's not just sitting there watching them passively. I've got to have a remote. I mean, it's constantly jumping around in the movie. I sit there with a legal pad. I usually wind up taking 5, 6, 7 pages of notes on this, on a particular movie. It's a vast study. But like I said, once I'm convinced something.
Thanks everybody for joining us. Hope you'll be here with me next week for another edition of Night Vision Radio. If I can speak by then, I sure will. I'll be here. Thanks so much.
Para mi mamita que me quita mi popó.